All right, welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Bracket Busters podcast. I am your host, Elliot Crow. I know it's been a couple of weeks since we have done any type of podcast episodes or done any YouTube videos, so I apologize for that. Work's been kind of busy, so just been really caught up in some other external stuff that haven't had enough time to really come back and really do any type of content for y'all. So I thought we'd just kind of dive into a little bit of a miniature recap of last week of some of our top 25 teams in our mid-major rankings, and then kind of get off into our main segment, which is going to be about which conferences can actually have multiple bids this season among mid-major conferences, excluding Mountain West, because let's face it, Mountain West is probably going to have more seeds than some of the larger conferences even. So let's start off with Vermont losing to NJIT. So Vermont was in our rankings last week. Unfortunately, we did have to remove them this week after this loss. However, Vermont was 18-5 on the season. They were 8-0 in conference in the American East, and NJIT was 5-15 on the season and 1-7 in conference. So this was just not a really great loss for Vermont. Tariq Francis dropped 31 points for NJIT, had 8 rebounds, 2 assists. I think this time of year you can lose games, but losing a game to NJIT is just pretty inexcusable at this point for a team that's supposed to be running the American East. They did bounce back with a 20-point comeback on UMBC on Saturday. However, they had to make a 20-point comeback on UMBC to even win that game. So really, the Catamounts could have potentially lost back-to-back games to NJIT and UMBC all in the same week, which would have been pretty detrimental because now they're only a game ahead of Bryant. They were ahead of UMass Lowell by a game after the NJIT loss, but then NJIT turned around and beat UMass Lowell on Saturday as well. So now NJIT has now beat the best two teams in the American East back to back, which is very impressive. Tariq Francis also dropped 26 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals against UMass Lowell. So this guy just dropped 31 points against Vermont and then turned around and dropped 26 points against UMass Lowell. So really an impressive week for this guy. I didn't get a chance to see if he won Player of the Week, but I would surely hope that he did after these performances because really, I mean, this is season turning around progress. I don't follow NJIT that closely, but they were independent for a really long time before they went in and joined the American East. So this has got to be a great turning point for them to be the two top teams in the American East. I know that Brian is now taking second place spot. Still very impressive for them. But for Vermont, just really bad loss all around, and really probably should have lost on Saturday to UMBC. So, for that reason, we had to remove them from top 25 rankings. But the Catamounts team is still a great team, always dangerous. It's like a mid-major dynasty up there in Vermont. So, really nothing too much to be worried about on the season. So let's talk about Samford. I know that we covered Samford quite a bit, but Samford had a really nice game against UNC Greensboro. So now after this last week, Samford's now 22-3 on the season. They're 11-1 in the SoCon. So for example, in this UNC Greensboro game, the Spartans were up 42-35 at the half, but Samford came back and outscored the Spartans 43-27 in the second half. They were led by Jaden Campbell, who put up 17 points. He was perfect 5 for 5 from the field, including 4 for 4 from 3. So Samford now has a 2-game lead in the SoCon, with Chattanooga sitting in second. I think it's pretty safe to say that the Bulldogs are probably going to win the SoCon. I think it's one of those things where if they happen to lose their tournament, I really don't know if they can get an at-large bid. The SoCon's really beat itself up. I mean, you have some really good teams in Samford and Western Carolina, and Furman's had some good wins, and Chattanooga's really turned their season around from kind of a rocky start. So, and UNC Greensboro, of course, is also an excellent team. So, you have 5 teams in that conference that are all very legitimate mid-majors, but the way that the NCAA selects their seeding and selects their teams for the tournament, I don't know if they'll get favored to that because there's a lot of other conferences that probably will take a second bid. Teams or conferences like maybe the Missouri Valley if they're nice enough. Mountain West is going to take probably at least 5 bids. So really, you're like looking at the other conferences and you say, I don't know where the Southern Conference can probably fit into actually hosting a second bid in the tournament. So for that reason, Samford really needs to win the SoCon tournament this season in order to guarantee themselves going to the tournament. They do have a net ranking of, I believe they're in the 60s now, which is like the highest in program history for them since the net rankings were released. So really great job what Bucky McMillan's doing there. On Saturday, they came around, they drilled VMI 102-63. If you haven't watched my video on the history of Samford and how Bucky McMillan coaches his teams. This was just a grade A example of that. He had 12 players play 11 minutes or more in that game. That's just how he does it. The minute differential between all the players is honestly hilarious when you look at the box score. So really, I encourage you. I'll link the video down below in YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube. If you can go watch that, it's a great like little 9-minute video talking about Samford and kind of how Bucky McMillan runs things because he's built a tremendous team down there in Birmingham. So moving on to Appalachian State, they took just a horrendous loss at Texas State. Pretty much eliminated any chance for an at-large bid. At that point in time, they were already just on the cusp of saying like maybe they could get it if they like lost in the Sun Belt Conference Championship. I'm going to pull a Joe Lenardi here. Lost in 4 overtimes to Troy, or lost in 4 overtimes to James Madison. So something like that. It was going to be pretty slim anyway, but this just put the nail in the coffin. Texas State was 3-8 in conference going in. Just terrible loss, but great win for Texas State. Davian Sykes had 17 points, 11 rebounds. So App State, after last week, is now 10-2 in the Sun Belt. They're tied with Troy. If you missed it on Saturday, I unfortunately did not get a chance to watch this game. We had some family in town. It was just a really busy Saturday for us, so I didn't get to watch as many games as I'd hoped. But I missed out on potentially what might have been the game of the season. So if you missed out, Sunbelt and MAC were doing a really cool thing this year. In February, they were doing a conference kind of battle series between all the teams. So each team kind of drew another team, and that was who you had to play. Kind of brings me back for those of you that are Missouri Valley fans. We used to do that with the Mountain West Conference. So really, I wish more conferences did this. I think it kind of breaks up the monotony of conference play, which, don't get me wrong, conference play is epic. It's always fun. There's always chaos. But I think really doing these type of series with other mid-major conferences is so important because it gains exposure. For example, some of these games end up on ESPN. So, I think it's something really cool to do for a 1 or even 2 game stretch sometimes in February just to kind of add a little bit more kick to it. But anyway, so Appalachian State and Toledo were battling out, and this game went to double overtime, and the score ended up being App State 109-104. So you could not ask more if you are a employee or a fan of the MAC or in the Sun Belt Conference or a team. This is perfect. This is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of content that we want to see. We had some other epic games in there. We had James Madison beat Akron. I believe the score was 73-59. So, really some great games against some really great mid-major conferences. That's what I like about that. The Sun Belt and the MAC, they probably kind of line up just 1-to-1. Even, it'd be great to see something in the future you could do the ASUN and SoCon, or you could do, again, bring back the MVC in Mountain West, although maybe the Mountain West is too good to play mid-major conference anymore, because honestly, they're teetering on the edge of even being a mid-major conference at this point. So, they might have to do, Gary Parrish says is 25-6. We might have to do a Power 5-1 for the Mountain West at this point in time. So we'll just see how that goes. But, maybe for Missouri Valley, you could do something that's similar to the A10, or do something with, the American Athletic Conference. There's really just a lot of great opportunities there. I would love to see more conferences do this kind of thing. So moving on to UNC Asheville, they actually knocked off High Point this week. So High Point is still in our top 25 rankings this week. It's a good loss for the Panthers. I think it comes back to what I'm saying. The Big South is going to be a one-bid league, so you really have to pretty much win your conference championship. So at this point in time, High Point could take this loss. They just shot terrible. All of UNC Asheville starters had at least 11 or more points. It was a great effort from their starting 5. High Point was held to 3 of 17 from 3. So, you're going to lose games. It's hard to go undefeated in a conference. So High Point's now 20-5 in the season, 10-1 in conference play. They had a nice bounce-back win against Gardner-Webb this weekend. So UNC Asheville has cut the lead to just 1 game. They're at 9-2 in the Big South, 16-9 on the season. So High Point really needs to kind of gather themselves, make sure they win out the rest of this year if they really want to make the tournament for the first time in quite a while. I know these fans are pumped about this Panthers team. I'm pumped about this Panthers team. It's an excellent team to watch. They're super energetic. It would be a really great matchup as a 13 seed, because they'll probably get a 13 seed, I would guess, in March Madness. So it'd be a really great matchup against maybe a mid-range power school. So there's something that we really hope we can see. I hope they can pull it out. I think the Panthers have a really great shot this season. And then moving on to our last top 25, this is going to kind of bridge into our last segment about which conferences can actually see multi bids. Bradley was upset by Evansville, so I know those of you listening probably understand that I'm a diehard Evansville fan. Grew up in Evansville. I went to UE. I have went to probably 100 UE games in my life. So this was a huge win for my team. In particular, we've really struggled probably the last 6 to 8 years. A lot of coaching turnover, a lot of struggles. But David Ragland's really doing a great job down there, turning this around. They're 15-10 on the season now. They lost to Murray State this weekend on a last-second shot by Jacoby Wood. So really, they were that close to being 16-9. They would have been 7-7 in conference had they held on and won that game at Murray State. So this win for Evansville is huge because Bradley won 11 games in a row. And the majority of those games, honest to God, were beatdowns. But they lost by 36 earlier this season. Now, given Ben Hummerkaus wasn't playing, but I don't think Ben Hummerkaus prevents you from losing by 36. Maybe he makes you lose by 18, but he's not that level of a caliber of guy that's going to prevent you from losing by 36 points. So, epic win for Evansville. Cannot be happier with the results of that game. For Bradley fans, though, this is a really tough loss. Really, it probably eliminated any chance whatsoever of an at-large bid for Bradley. Again, at that point in time, we don't even know if Drake's going to get an at-large bid if Indiana State wins a tournament. So Bradley's now going to have to win the tournament in order for that. I would assume Indiana State would get an at-large bid at that point in time. They deserve it. Their net rankings in the top 30 in the country. They are now ranked in the AP poll at number 23. I think there would be no excuse whatsoever for Indiana State not to get an at-large bid. So for Bradley, it is a tough loss. I know Braves fans were pretty disappointed in that one. Bradley did kind of shoot themselves in the foot a little bit. They started off that game in a terrible, terrible shooting slump. So Evansville kind of just put their foot on the gas pedal for the first half of the game. And really by halftime, Bradley dug out of it. Bradley was down 5 going into half. And it was even more heartbreaking because it was an incredible second half, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then Duke Dean actually hit a three that was just 0.1 second too late. Shot clock was expiring, game clock was expiring, and it went in. Bradley fans thought they hit a game-tying shot. Would have been 73-73 to go to overtime, but I'm telling you, it was 0.1 second too late. So great win for Evansville. Maybe for Bradley fans, not a great loss, but on the other side, really, it's like Evansville's a better team this year. I know people are releasing Evansville and saying, well, that's a bad loss. It's not a bad loss. They're 6-8 in conference now. Probably should have beat Murray State in that last game. They would have been 7-7. David Ragland's really turned this team around. So great win for Evansville, and really, not a terrible loss for Bradley. So kind of going into our next segment, which is talking about which bids or which mid-major conferences can see multi-bids. I know there's a lot of talk right now. It's February. We're going into mid-February, honestly. So Selection Sunday is now less than 5 weeks away. So kind of want to take a second here. Let's talk about what teams, what conferences can see multiple bids. I'm going to exclude the Mountain West. That's not even a question. It's not really worth. Yeah, at this point in time, it's a question of are we going to see 5 or 6 bids? Because I know that we did our first podcast episode we ever did. We talked about whether the Mountain West could see 6 bids. And at that point in time, I was pretty hesitant, but honestly, I'm coming around to saying it actually is a realistic possibility. The top 6 teams in that conference all have a net ranking of over 50. Nevada's really turned themselves around from a rocky start in conference. Now they actually have the most AP top 25 wins in conference. They're 3-1 in the AP top 25. They have a great game tonight coming up against New Mexico. So if you have any plans, make sure to watch that game. It starts at 10 p.m. Central. Let's be honest, I'm probably going to fall asleep during it, but I'm still going to at least watch the first half because it's going to be that would be an incredible win for Nevada. Be an incredible win for New Mexico. So really, this conference is just insane this season. So we're not even going to worry about that. That's a multi-bid. It's probably a 5 at least minimum. It could even be a 6-bid league. So let's start with the Missouri Valley, because we kind of already talked briefly about this with Bradley and Indiana State. And really, Indiana State, I don't know if you missed this, but Joe Lunardi came out, it's probably been 2 weeks ago, and said the Sycamores would have to win every game by 20 and win in quadruple overtime against Drake in the MVC championship to make the tournament as an at-large bid. That's insanity. I don't like. I don't want to talk about rigging. I don't want to talk about favoritism, whatever it is. But you cannot tell me that if Indiana State lost in the championship game to Drake or to Bradley, even, that they would not go to the tournament. Because that is just horrendous treatment to mid majors, which we all know they do. If you've seen any of the brackets that are lining up for the NIT tournament, it's just all freaking 500 power schools that are, mid at best. That there's no shot really for mid majors and NIT anymore. So if you're going to tell me, let's say Indiana State only loses to Drake, you're going to exclude a team with 4 losses who at one point in time was ranked late in the season in conference? That's a joke. Anyway, so getting off that rant. So Indiana State went into Valpo beating by 40. So, they kind of stuck their middle fingers up to Joe Lunardi there a little bit and said, well, I guess if you want us to win by 20 out, we'll win by 40. So anyway, great game for the Sycamores. Valpo's in a rebuilding season. They had a really tough loss this weekend again. I believe it's to Belmont. And, it's a rebuilding season for the Beacons, so, I wouldn't take this to heart if you're a Beacons fan. But for Indiana State, really great rebounding win. Loved it. Kind of just said, screw you, Joe. Really just came around, pulled that one off. But then they traveled to Missouri State. They held off 73-71. Missouri State on paper, you might think, isn't, crazy. We had them in our top 25, in one of the really early weeks, and that was because they were coming off some nice wins. I mean, they'd beat St. Mary's at that point in time. They were having a really nice non-conference season. But Missouri State is, a really hit-or-miss team. And if you grew up or you even watched Missouri Valley games for an extended period of time, for at least a couple of seasons, it's extremely hard to win at Missouri State. Missouri State plays what I would call very similar to bully ball. Very athletic, grit and grindy, really going to take it at you at the rim. Mason in that game had, I believe he's 11 of 18 from the field for 26 points. They're just a really athletic team. And, I think they almost knocked off Indiana State. I mean, Indiana State was able to pull out 73-71. When I look at that score, I wouldn't be scared about that if I was a Sycamore fan. Again, it's extremely hard to win at Missouri State. It has always been hard. Anybody, that is the definition of home court advantage for that team. So they did hold off, and they were finally awarded a spot in the AP poll this week. They were now ranked 23rd. This is the first time since Larry Bird in 1979. So if you're a Sycamores fan, we are rolling, ladies and gentlemen. So, okay, I'll talk around Indiana State about the Missouri Valley. Let's talk about Drake for a second. Drake is 20-5. They're ranked 54th in the net. They're 3-3 in quad 1 and 2 wins. They held off SIU in overtime 82-78 last week. It was a freaking amazing game if you watched that. Kind of chaotic last few seconds. Maybe a questionable call on SIU that would have probably turned the tides of that game. But great win for Drake. And then they turned around and beat Bradley 74-67. Tucker DeVries in that game had 22 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. Connor Enright had 3 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. And for Bradley, Duke Dean had 23 points. So, again, kind of coming back to Bradley, it's really going to hurt their at-large chances of losing back-to-back games there. But for Drake, a great win. You're beating the third-place team. So now they have a win against Indiana State in conference, and they have a win against Bradley in conference. So you have a win over the first-place team and the second and the third-place team. Really, what's going to stick in their craw is that 30-point loss to Belmont at Belmont, which was just crazy. But here's the thing. You're going to have off nights. But at this point in time, when you're a mid-major, you just can't afford to have those. So looking at Bradley real quick, just to kind of round this one out. Bradley was ranked now 59th in the net, so still not bad. They're 3-3 in quad 1 and 2 as well. So should the Missouri Valley be a two-bid league? In my opinion, yes. I'm not saying that as a biased fan of the Missouri Valley. I'm just saying that as a fact of Drake and Indiana State are two great mid-majors. Indiana State should be a lock. That should even be a question. I really want to see Drake win the NBC championship simply for the fact that that would guarantee that we probably have a two-bid league because then Indiana State would get that large bid. I do not think that Drake will get the at-large bid separately if they lose in the championship game. At that point in time, they'll award, I don't freaking know, 500 SEC school to go in instead. I don't think that they would award the NBC for that. It would be a crime. The NBC is so good this year. They're ranked the 9th best conference. We kind of have a conference comparison coming up here. But for example, here, the NBC is currently ranked the ninth best conference. They're ahead of the American Athletic Conference, which is everybody's saying is a two-bid lock. I don't know if I agree with that. And they're just a shade behind the A10. So, for example, and I'm pulling these from team rankings that kind of do some different statistic analysis and then just give you an overall average of the conference. So, for example, the Pac 12 is the seventh best conference in the country. They were at 551. Then the A10 is eighth at 543. NBC is 527 and ninth. The AAC is 10th at 523. The Ivy League is 513 at 11, and the WCC is 501 at 12. So when you look at that, the NBC is, statistically speaking, the ninth best conference in this country. That is a two-bid league. I don't care what anybody says, but in order to see it happen, Jerry's going to have to beat Indiana State on Sunday at Arch Madness. Really hope it happens. It would be a crime to not see both those teams in this tournament. So moving on, kind of diving into, I kind of spoke on this highly. I am very pessimistic about the American Athletic Conference. I think it's horrendously overrated. FAU is still ranked. I don't understand that at all. I don't get it. Honestly, I think they probably shouldn't have been ranked 2 weeks ago, and they're still ranked. They're ranked 24th. This is the same thing with, I don't know how Memphis ever got to number 10 in the AP poll at all. This is why the AP poll sucks. Like, that's what everybody sees, and everybody sees the number on TV next to the team name, but the AP poll is freaking terrible. I don't think half these people that are voters watch games, I feel like. But anyway, let's get off that rant. So FAU, let's just look at the net rankings, and let's look at the quad 1 and 2 wins for each of these teams. So actually, I will give them credit. Technically, they have 5 teams in the top 100 of the net rankings. They have FAU, who's number 24 in the AP poll. They were 26 in the net rankings. They're 6-3 in quad 1 and 2. SMU is 43 in the net rankings. They are 1-6 in quad 1 and 2. North Texas is 78 in the net rankings. They're 1-7 in quad 1 and 2. Memphis is 75 in the net rankings. They are 5-4 in quad 1 and 2. And Charlotte is 98 in the net rankings. They are 3-5 in quad 1 and 2. So this is why I love the net rankings. I understand the premise of it. I think it was a super helpful statistic in terms of gauging people's resumes. SMU should not be ranked 43rd in the net rankings. I don't they put so much favoritism into drilling teams. It's insane. I mean, SMU went to Murray and beat Murray by 40 points in December. So those are the type of things that help SMU have a 43 ranking, but they're freaking 1-6 in quad 1 and 2 games. I mean, that is not an at-large resume. So you cannot use the net ranking and just stare at it and say, this is why I argue that a team should be in the tournament this season. So, with that being said, I can see an argument for a two-bid league. Let's say FAU loses. Let's say FAU loses to North Texas. I mean, okay, let's just take a second back here. None of these teams are even in first in their conference. South Florida's first, and they're not even in the top 100 of the net rankings. Amazing job what he's built down there, by the way. This is the same guy that was at Kennesaw and took a Kennesaw State team that won one game and took them to the tournament for the first time ever within 4 seasons. Fantastic. That South Florida is probably going to become the same thing that Kennesaw State did. He's doing this in a very short period of time. So kudos to them. However, none of these teams that are even in talk of having an at-large bid in this conference are even in first. And this is my gripe with this whole thing about the comparison against the Missouri Valley. I don't think the AAC should have more than one bid. I really don't. Memphis has had some terrible losses. They were a hit-and-miss team. They should have lost to Wichita State, in which FAU just turned around and should have lost to Wichita State as well, because FAU lost to UAB, in which they've now lost, I think they're their last 11 games in Birmingham to UAB. I can't remember. It was something like that. And so now UAB's beat Memphis and FAU. UAB's not even in the top 100 of the net. So, and honestly, Wichita State, who's been terrible this year, should have beat FAU too, and Memphis. FAU had to go to overtime against Wichita State, and Memphis had to hit a game-winning buzzer beater against Wichita State. This conference is not a two-bid league. I understand they're going to get it. It's probably going to happen. But that's frustrating for other mid-major conferences. Like the A10 should have two bids over them. The Missouri Valley should have two bids over them. And we're over here talking about the A10 and Missouri Valley only having one bids. Ridiculous. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about the American Athletic Conference. It grinds my gears. I don't understand the hype around it. It is ranked 10th conference. It's like it's the most overrated mid-major conference in basketball. Hate to tell you. And I'm going to probably get heckled by Memphis fans, but you're a mid-major. Honestly, I know like we can have the conversation about Gonzaga, but Gonzaga's mid-major too. At the end of the day, we can see that when we start talking about the West Coast Conference here. But anyway, let's move on to the A10. So the A10, a little bit similar. They have 7 teams in the top 100 of the net rankings. Dayton has the highest. Dayton's ranked 16th in the AP poll this week. They're 18th in the net rankings. They were 8-4 in quad 1 and 2. St. Bonaventure 72 in the net rankings, 3-7 quad 1 and 2. Richmond's 70 in the net, 66-5 in the quad 1 and 2. VCU is 73 in the net, 6-6 in quad 1 and 2. UMass 91 in the net, 0-3 in quad 1 and 2. St. Joseph's 96 in the net, 3-4 in quad 1 and 2, and George Mason 88 in the net, 4-6 in quad 1 and 2. So, all right, let's compare back to what we just talked about with the AAC. You look at this. This is better than any team in that league. So, okay, so we're going to talk about Memphis. Let's compare Richmond to Memphis for a second here. Memphis is 75 in the net, 5-4 in quad 1 and 2. Richmond 70 in the net, 6-5 in quad 1 and 2. There is no difference. None. I understand that Memphis's resume is going to carry them because they had some non-conference wins, but let's face it, some of those non-conference wins aren't looking so good a few months later. So I don't buy that the A10 is not a multi-bid league. It should be a multi-bid league. Let's say that Richmond wins the conference tournament. Dayton's going to get an at-large bid. That's a 2-bid league. But it's ridiculous to me that Dayton's going to have to lose the conference tournament to probably get a second bid. So I don't know. I just horrendously disagree with it. It is a mistreatment of mid-major programs. All these teams are great. Dayton has a better quad 1 and 2 than FAU, which I understand. Like, you could argue, well, Dayton's 16 and FAU's 24. That's fine. But FAU's had, like, premier treatment all year, despite some really not good losses. So, I don't know. I just don't buy it. St. Bonaventure is a good team. VCU is a good team. St. Joseph is a good team. George Mason's a good team. And UMass has had their moments. So I just can't argue that this isn't a 2-bid league. The A10 is fun to watch year in, year out, pretty much at this point in time. You're going to see the Flyers in the tournament unless they literally lost like every game between now and when they lose in the tournament. But that's not going to happen. But in order to see a multi-bid A10, Dayton's going to have to lose in the A10 conference tournament. Whether that be by a team by like Richmond or St. Bonaventure, some team like that's probably going to have to be the one to knock them off. I mean, heck, VCU just beat him 49-47. Yes, that was the final score in a Division I game. But VCU's always just had like a defensive juggernaut team. I've seen them win games like that in the 50s and the 40s. It's insane to me. But even VCU could pull out a win and beat, knock off Dayton in the tournament or whatever it is. But at that point in time, I think it would become a 2-bid league. But I think just outright, if Dayton wins the conference championship, I doubt that the A10 sees more than one bid. So covering into the last one, we have the WCC, really ran by just 3 teams. St. Mary's, who's ranked for the first time this season at 18 in the AP poll. They are 15th in the net. They are 6-6 in quad 1 and 2. Gonzaga is 24th in the net, 3-7 in quad 1 and 2. And San Francisco 64 in the net at 1-6 in quad 1 and 2. It's going to be a one-bid league. I think the only way that we see a not one-bid league would be if Gonzaga beat St. Mary's in the conference tournament. And then, because I think St. Mary's has arguably probably the better at-large resume. I will say this, Gonzaga just helped themselves tremendously going to Rupp Arena and beating Kentucky. Huge win for Gonzaga. I think at this point in time, Gonzaga still does not have enough. They're 3-7 in quad 1 and 2. Maybe you'd have an argument they have a little bit of a better treatment as a mid-major, which is valid. I go back to when I started Bracket Busters, I was excluding Gonzaga from the mid-major top 25 rankings, which, given, was probably the wrong thing to do, looking back. However, at that point in time, I was arguing that, like, they don't get mid-major treatment. They get Power 5 treatment. So, like, really, that would probably be their only saving grace at this point in time if they don't win the tournament and get their automatic qualifier, because St. Mary's has done a fantastic job turning their team around. They start off the season 3-5, and they have not lost a game in the WCC. They're ranked in the AP poll. Their net rankings are top 20 in this country. They have an at-large resume. They're 6-6 in quad 1 and 2. Gonzaga just doesn't have that backing them, so I think it's going to be a difficult time for Gonzaga to try to just get an at-large bid. So that being said, I do think the WCC can be a two-bid league. I think out of all of these that we're sitting here talking about, the AAC, the Missouri Valley, the A10, the WCC probably has the most realistic chance of being a two-bid league, simply for the fact that San Francisco or Gonzaga could beat St. Mary's. Like, I'm not really spending too much time talking about the Dons here, but San Francisco is 64 in the net, 1-6, quad 1 and 2. That's not a great, looking at the quad 1-2 wins. However, that being said, the Dons are a dangerous team. Excellent shooting team. They're a fun team to watch. If they beat, they could go to the tournament as well. And if they beat St. Mary's in the championship game, all of a sudden St. Mary's has an at-large bid and San Francisco's in the tournament. So really, multiple different paths here. I think the WCC probably has the best chance of being end up being a two-bid league, simply for the fact that I think Indiana State's probably going to win the Missouri Valley, and then I think that the AAC. Let's face it, the AAC is probably going to be a two-bid league, even if I just sit here and disagree with it. But thus life. So really kind of diving into it, I know I kind of included the Ivy League. The Ivy League's not going to be a two-bid league. I think Cornell, Yale, and Princeton are all great teams, but they will not reward the Ivy League with two bids. So if we're sitting here and we're looking at some of the top mid-majors, again, we have, in terms of conference rankings, Pac-12 at 7, A-10 at 8, Missouri Valley at 9, American Athletic Conference at 10, Ivy League at 11, and WCC at 12. I think out of this, you're going to have the AAC get two bids, which is annoying, but then you're going to have Missouri Valley probably have one bid, WCC maybe have two bids, and the AA-10 probably have one bid. This is with me saying the Missouri Valley, Indiana State wins, and Dayton wins the A-10. They don't award another conference team with an at-large bid. Criminal or not, I think that is just the way that this is going to go. I think the AAC, they're going to give FAU a bid no matter what. I don't know who the other bid's going to go to. If they award it to Memphis, that's insanity to me. But regardless, I think that's probably what's going to happen. I would say that the AAC should be a one-bid league, and the Missouri Valley of A-10 should pick up an additional one of those bids. But we'll see how this plays out. So, all right, thank you all for listening to this episode. If you are listening on YouTube, make sure to give us a like and a subscribe. Turn on that bell for the notifications. And if you're listening on Substack, be sure to give us a subscription on Substack. We have a lot of users out there that read our content, but then we don't have them on their subscription list. So subscribing to our Substack is a great way to get notifications of when we drop new content. Right now, everything's pretty much free, but we do have plans in the future to add some additional premium content. So it's a great way to get up-to-date access and information about when we release new content, as Twitter throttles our posts regarding Substack. So if you follow us on Twitter or follow us on Instagram, also make sure to like our content there and share it out with your friends. And we'll catch you all next time. Thank you.